The first thing I hear every morning is a rooster that does not belong to me. He starts before sunrise, somewhere beyond the concrete wall behind my little house, and he sounds like he has a personal argument with the darkness. Then the tricycles begin coughing to life on the road below. A woman across the lane sweeps leaves with a stiff broom. By 6, I can smell garlic frying in oil and coffee strong enough to wake the dead. I sit on my porch with a chipped blue mug in my hand and watch the fog lift off the hills around Tagaytay. Some mornings I still have to remind myself where I am. I am 68 years old. I live in the Philippines. My rent is 22,000 pesos a month, about $390 depending on the exchange rate. I can see banana trees from my kitchen window. My blood pressure is lower than it was 5 years ago. I know the names of the people who live on both sides of me. And 3 years ago, I was sleeping in my daughter's basement in Ohio because the pension I had spent 32 years earning was suddenly worth less than half of what I had been promised. Less than half. That is the part I still have trouble saying without feeling something tighten in my chest. My name is Dennis Walker. I grew up outside Akron, Ohio, and I spent most of my adult life working maintenance at a plant that made industrial pumps. Nothing glamorous. Steel-toed boots, ear protection, oil under my fingernails, and a lunchbox that smelled faintly of bologna no matter what I packed in it. I started there when I was 24. I thought I would stay a few years, learn a trade, and move on. I stayed 32 years. I became the man people called when a line went down at 2 in the morning. I knew which motors could be coaxed back for another shift and which bearings were lying to you with a quiet hum. I trained younger guys. I missed birthdays. I worked Christmas twice. I took overtime whenever it appeared because that was what responsible men did where I came from. The deal was simple, at least I believed it was simple. I gave the company my back, my knees, my weekends, and the best part of my hearing. In return, I would retire with a pension that let me live with some dignity. The number they showed me during my last benefits meeting was $3,420 a month before taxes. $3,420. I wrote it on a yellow legal pad and circled it twice. Add Social Security later, keep the mortgage paid down, and I would be all right. Not rich. I never expected rich. I expected stable. My wife Carol and I had ordinary plans. We wanted to replace the back deck, spend one winter near the Gulf, and maybe take a train through the Canadian Rockies. She wanted a greenhouse. I wanted a fishing boat I would probably use less than I claimed. Then Carol got sick. It started with exhaustion, then bruising, then appointments, tests, and a doctor speaking too gently. Leukemia has a way of turning calendars into battlegrounds. Every date becomes a treatment, a result, a setback, or a number you are afraid to hear. She fought for 19 months. I used vacation days, savings, and every favor I had built up. I learned to sleep in hospital chairs. I learned that love can look like holding a paper cup while the person you married throws up into it. Carol died 6 weeks after my 61st birthday. After the funeral, I went back to the plant because I did not know what else to do. The machines were loud enough to drown out my thoughts. Men slapped my shoulder and looked away. I worked another year and a half, then my knees finally made the decision for me. I retired on a Friday in March. They gave me a sheet cake, a watch, and a card signed by people whose handwriting I recognized better than their faces. I stood in the break room and told everyone I was looking forward to doing nothing. That was not true. I was terrified of doing nothing. But I was more terrified of admitting I had no idea who I was, without a plant badge clipped to my shirt. For the first year, the checks came exactly as expected. I paid the mortgage. I helped my daughter, Michelle, with a car repair. I bought a used aluminum fishing boat from a man in Canton and discovered, as Carol had predicted, that I enjoyed talking about fishing more than actually fishing. Then a white envelope arrived from the pension administrator. I almost threw it into the recycling with the insurance advertisements. I opened it standing at the kitchen counter, one hand resting on Carol's old recipe box. The letter said the company pension plan was underfunded. The business had been broken apart, sold, reorganized, and pushed into bankruptcy proceedings. There were guarantees, limits, formulas, and references to federal rules I did not understand. The language was calm. That was what made it cruel. Nobody wrote, "Dennis, the promise you built your life around is gone." They wrote, "Your benefit is subject to adjustment." My monthly pension dropped from $3,420 to $1,286. I called the number on the letter and waited 47 minutes. I remember because I stared at the microwave clock the whole time. The woman who answered was polite. She sounded tired. I kept telling her there had to be a mistake. 32 years, I said. I worked there 32 years. She told me she understood. Of course she did not understand. How could she? It was not her life sitting in front of her as a reduced monthly figure. I appealed. I called a lawyer. I joined a group of former employees. We went to meetings in a union hall that smelled like old coffee and wet coats. Men who had once argued over football sat quietly with folders in their laps. Some had lost more than I had. One man had a wife in memory care. Another was raising 2 grandchildren. We wrote letters. We signed forms. We listened to explanations about funding ratios and statutory maximums. Nothing changed. I know. Companies fail. Markets turn. Rules have limits. Famous last words from every man who ever believed a promise printed on official paper. My Social Security helped, but not enough. Carol's medical bills had eaten through most of our savings. The house still had a mortgage. Property taxes climbed. The furnace needed replacing. I began doing arithmetic before every purchase. A new furnace meant no dental work. Dental work meant carrying a balance on the credit card. A balance on the credit card meant waking at 3 in the morning with my heart pounding. I sold the boat first, then Carol's car, then tools I had owned since my 20s. Each sale felt reasonable by itself. Together, they looked like a life being dismantled. For 8 months, I tried everything. Employers saw a man in his 60s with bad knees. I lasted 11 weeks at a hardware store before the concrete sent pain up my legs. I looked into school bus driving, warehouse inventory, and overnight security. My body did not cooperate. I refinanced. I cut cable. I stopped heating 2 rooms. I ate soup for 3 days at a time because it was cheap and because cooking for one still made the house feel too quiet. Michelle started asking questions in that careful voice adult children use when they are trying not to frighten you. Are you doing okay, Dad? Do you need help with the mortgage? Would it make sense to sell? I told her I was fine until the morning the bank called about a missed payment. That was the moment the last of my pride gave out. I sold the house for less than I had hoped, paid what I owed, and moved into Michelle's basement outside Columbus. She had a patient husband and 2 teenagers who tried not to make me feel like an intruder. They gave me a couch, a television, a bathroom, and a ground-level window where I could see shoes passing outside. Everybody was kind. That almost made it worse. You are 65 years old, sitting in your daughter's basement, listening to her family move around above you. Every floorboard creak sounds like proof that you have become a burden. You wait until the kitchen is empty before making coffee because you do not want to be in the way. You fold your blankets every morning even though nobody asked you to. That was me. I had spent my whole life believing responsibility meant never needing rescue. Now my daughter was buying the brand of cereal I liked and pretending she had wanted it anyway. The idea of the Philippines came from a man named Ray who had worked in shipping at the plant. I had not seen him in years. He found me through a Facebook group for former employees and sent a message after hearing about my pension. He wrote, "You ever think about leaving?" I assumed he meant Ohio. Ray lived in Iloilo. He had moved there after a divorce and said his Social Security covered his life comfortably. I thought he was exaggerating. People always exaggerate online, especially men standing beside palm trees. Then he sent me a video of his apartment, clean tile floors, a little balcony, a grocery store nearby. He told me his rent, his electric bill, and what he paid for health insurance. The numbers did not sound real. That night I fell into a YouTube hole. I watched retired teachers, former truck drivers, and widowers in cities I had never heard of. The cheerful ones made me suspicious. I trusted the men who admitted the traffic, paperwork, heat, insects, and brownouts could wear you down. For 6 weeks, I watched everything. Then I started reading expat forums. That nearly scared me off. One man said the Philippines was paradise. The next said it was impossible. A third seemed to spend every waking hour arguing about visa extensions. I joined Facebook groups and asked embarrassing questions under my real name. How much do you actually spend? Can you live there without being rich? What happens if you get sick? Do locals resent older foreigners? The useful answers came from regular people, not influencers, not men posing beside sports cars. A retired postal worker sent me his monthly budget in a spreadsheet. A woman from Wisconsin explained private hospitals and insurance. A British man warned me never to lend money I could not afford to lose. Ray told me to come for 2 months before making any permanent decision. I made lists. Visa rules, medication, banking, health coverage, climate, neighborhoods, scams, flights home. I compared Cebu, Iloilo, Bohol, and Tagaytay. Tagaytay caught my attention because it was cooler, green, and close enough to Manila for major hospitals without feeling like a giant city. Michelle hated the idea. Not because she wanted me in the basement forever, because she loved me and pictured every bad headline at once. She asked whether I was running away. I told her maybe I was, but staying where I was felt like disappearing slowly. That sentence ended the argument. I booked a 59-day trip, round-trip ticket, 1 suitcase, nothing permanent. The night before I left, I barely slept. I kept thinking I had become one of those foolish old men people whisper about. Lonely, broke, easy to flatter. I promised Michelle I would not buy property, invest in a business, marry anyone, lend anyone money, or make a decision I could not reverse. Then I flew halfway around the world with 32 years of work, reduced to a pension check I could no longer trust. When I stepped outside the airport in Manila, the heat hit me like someone opening an oven. Horns, diesel, men calling out destinations, families waiting with signs. I was tired, sweating through my shirt, and completely certain I had made a terrible mistake. A driver took me south toward Tagaytay. Traffic crawled. Motorcycles moved through gaps I could barely see. Roadside shops flashed past in bright colors. Then the air changed. The city loosened. I saw slopes, fruit stands, wet green leaves, and clouds sitting low over the hills. My first rental was a furnished studio behind a family's house. I paid 18,000 pesos for the month, roughly $320 at the time. It had a bed, a small refrigerator, a table, a shower with an electric heater, and one stubborn gecko that lived behind the curtain. The first morning I bought pandesal, eggs, and coffee for less than a fast food breakfast in Ohio. 3 days later, the woman behind the counter remembered my order. That small thing nearly broke me, being remembered. I had forgotten how much that mattered. The first month was not paradise. I got food poisoning, overpaid a tricycle driver, spent an afternoon in the wrong government office, and had my bank card frozen. The humidity ruined my vitamins. A neighbor's dog barked every night for a week. I also discovered that loneliness does not vanish just because the scenery changes. Some evenings I sat alone in the studio, watching American television on my laptop, and wondered what I had done. But the financial pressure changed almost immediately. Back in Ohio, my monthly housing, utilities, insurance, food, and transportation had consumed nearly everything coming in. In Tagaytay, even after private health coverage, rent, groceries, visa costs, transportation, and a cushion for emergencies, I had money left at the end of the month. Money left. The first time that happened, I checked my figures 4 times. I did not suddenly become wealthy. That is important. I became stable. There is a difference. After the trial trip, I returned to Ohio for 6 weeks. I saw my doctor, handled paperwork, sold what little furniture I still had in storage, and spent time with Michelle and the grandchildren. Then I went back to the Philippines with 2 suitcases and a plan to stay 1 year. That was nearly 3 years ago. I now rent a small one-bedroom house on a quiet lane for 22,000 pesos a month. It has a covered porch, a real kitchen, and room for visitors. Electricity varies with air conditioning. Imported groceries cost more, so I buy local vegetables, fish, chicken, rice, and fruit. My monthly budget is not magic. I track it carefully. Rent, utilities, internet, phone, health insurance, medication, transportation, visa expenses, food, and entertainment come to around $1,650 in an average month. Some months are higher. Medical care can be expensive. Flights home are expensive. Anyone who tells you there are no risks is selling something. But my income covers my life again. That changed more than my bank account. I began walking every morning. I lost 18 pounds, and my doctor adjusted my blood pressure medication. On Wednesdays, I meet 2 Americans, a Canadian, a Filipino retired engineer, and a woman from New Zealand who corrects us when we complain too much. I also became close to the family who owns the house next door. Their youngest boy, Paolo, was fascinated by my toolbox. The first time he saw me repair a broken electric fan, he watched like I was performing surgery. Now he brings me anything with a loose screw or a strange noise. After spending 32 years being useful, then 2 years feeling discarded, being asked to fix a fan meant more than it should have. His grandmother, Lita, sends over food. I tried to return every container empty until she informed me that was rude, so now I put fruit or cookies inside. We have built a whole friendship through plastic containers. Michelle visited last year, prepared to inspect my life for evidence of disaster. By the third day, she was drinking coffee with Lita and laughing about how stubborn I am. She saw my clinic, met my friends, checked the locks, and questioned my budget. On her last night, she told me something I will never forget. She said, "Dad, you seem like yourself again." I had not realized how long it had been since anybody could say that. Do I miss America? Of course I do. I miss my daughter. I miss my grandchildren's school events. I miss autumn leaves, decent rye bread, and knowing exactly how every system works. I miss Carol in places that have nothing to do with geography. Moving did not cure grief. It did not restore my pension. It did not make the company keep its promise. What it did was give me room to build a life around the money I actually had instead of spending every day mourning the money I had been told to expect. There is anger in me still. I would be lying if I said otherwise. Sometimes I think about those 32 years and feel cheated. I think about the missed birthdays, the overtime, the night calls, and the faith I placed in people who never knew my name. But I do not wake up angry anymore. I wake up to that rooster. I make coffee. I sweep the porch even though Lita says I do it wrong. I check messages from Michelle. I walk down the hill while the air is still cool. Sometimes Paolo is waiting with a broken toy under his arm. Sometimes the fog is so thick I cannot see the road beyond the gate. 3 years ago, fog would have frightened me. I needed to see every number, every plan, every safe step ahead. I believed security meant certainty. Now I understand it differently. Security is knowing what your life costs. It is having people who notice when you have not opened your curtains. It is enough money for the month, a little set aside for trouble, and the dignity of making your own choices. I lost the retirement I had planned. I lost the house where Carol and I thought we would grow old. I lost a promise I had trusted for 32 years. but I did not lose the rest of my life. That is what I wish someone had told me while I was sitting in my daughter's basement, staring through that ground level window at other people's shoes. Starting over at 65 did not look brave. It looked humiliating. It looked reckless. It looked like failure with a plane ticket. Maybe that is why it worked. I had stopped trying to protect the appearance of the life I was supposed to have. The sun is coming through the fog now. The concrete wall behind my house is turning gold. The woman across the lane has finished sweeping. Somewhere nearby, garlic is hitting a hot pan, and the rooster has finally decided he has made his point. I lift my chipped blue mug and look out at the banana trees. I still remember the exact amount they took from my pension, but most mornings it is no longer the first number I think about.